you see here, livarach is similar to an Aramaic form. Uh, in Hebrew, when you have these hitpa'els and pls, the tendency is more toward a tzerei, but in Aramaic, more toward patach. Think about the Kaddish, yitgadal o yitgadel. Okay? Nipach, did he inflate something? You'd say nipach or nipeach. The more Hebrew form is nipeach, and the more Aramaic form is nipach. Okay? So this already you see that they have a more of an Aramaic form, whatever it is. It's I'd like I more prefer Hebrew forms, for whatever reason. Aramaic's great, but we're trying to get back to the original. So you see just here a few examples of their shita that's a little bit different. You're not going to find it this way in the Makbili or in the Korain. And by the way, I don't think there's one true way. As you know, there was like the Babylonian system, the Timani system. Those are systems of vowelization that represented how they were speaking, and to each his own. It's when you try to, let's say, stuff Babylonian pronunciation or Yemenite pronunciation into this Yemenite, this Masoretic vowelization system that you start to have contradictions. For example, I never understood why Rabbi Ben Zion Cohen, the one that from whom Rabbi Bar-Hayim learned the diktuk, when it comes to the whole how to pronounce Segol Tzerei, he follows basically the Yemenite tradition. But with regards to Kamatz and Cholam, he follows, let's say, a more exacting Ashkenazic tradition, which is kind of weird. He picks and chooses from different traditions, which is, by the way, perhaps the right thing to do. It's a mashal for, let's say, at a large room, a large hall, and someone took a precious vase and stood on a ladder right in the middle of the hall and smashed the vase right in the middle of the floor. So it scatters into pieces. And now you have people along the edges of the hall are going to pick up some of those pieces, because it goes in all these different directions. That was basically how the Masorah worked when the Jews were exiled. So every Jew, every group took away a different part of the truth. Yeah, and they had to compensate for it. Now we have to put it back together using our minds and debating and looking into things to try to figure out how things actually work. Even Professor Kahn, who put out that whole thing recently about a Tiberian pronunciation, knows just when the Jews who were speaking Hebrew shifted from a vav sounding like a W to sounding like a V, correct? He's basically pinpointing when it happened. But he recommends, so you pronounce a vav like a V most times, except, in the times when they're still pronouncing it properly like a W. So he has this contradiction there already. Whereas everybody who knows Hebrew diktuk knows that if you're really trying to get back to the way it was pronounced once upon a time, the vav is a W sound. And that's fairly obvious to anybody who studies these things. So we're all trying to get back to something. It's clear that our system of vowelization reflects a pronunciation that was mostly kept by Ashkenazic Jews. Of course, things were lost. Going to Eastern Europe really messed up a lot of vowels, and it's fairly clear why it is that the Ashkenazim are pronouncing their consonants the way they do. Why a tet disappeared, why a chet disappeared. Chet was already disappearing earlier in Chazal's times, and even in Arabic, chet is sometimes pronounced as a chaf. Perhaps even chet. That's what they say, that the chet in words like Rachel and Yericho was actually pronounced like we're still pronouncing it like a chaf today. It was already, those were the first words to go. Yeah, that's why it's Jericho and Rachel, and even old transliterations, there's a ch there, not an h. So already things were happening. Okay, Hebrew was never static, but I think some pronunciations are better than others. But whatever, that's my opinion.
I like Siboleth.
Siboleth, okay. And
how far back do you go with that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because we can't, our positive tradition, recorded tradition, basically goes back to the Masoretes. So we try to at least go back to whatever the Masoretes were trying to go for. Going farther back is unfortunately not attested to in any real recorded tradition. It's like Torah Sheba'al Peh. How do we know it's a Torah Sheba'al Peh? Because at a certain point they're writing it down. The Rambam says they're always taking notes, but eventually Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gave us an authorized version of the Torah Sheba'al Peh with regards to the halacha. So we can't say that, before Mishnaic times, the halacha was this and that, and we should go back to that. You're not allowed to do that. We have a tradition in Chazal, things have already been ruled on. There was just recently, Gavriel showed me, I was on Shabbos, he pointed something out, he says, there's an argument here that Birkot HaMitzvah are post-temple. Even though you could find in the Tosefta, they talk about Birkot Mitzvah all the time. Birkot Mitzvah are never mentioned explicitly in the Mishnah. You could always touch it. They're in Gemara all the time. They're mentioned in the Tosefta. They must be a later rabbinic enactment. That's one of the claims. This gentleman, I have the actually the whole paper here. It's like 80 something pages long. It's up on my computer. Hold on, there's someone else waiting. Okay, hold on. We have a chat here. Okay, welcome, Josh. And basically, it's of later vintage. So that's a strange thing. If someone say, you know what, I want to go back to the way things were before they instituted Birkot Mitzvah. It was just Birkot Shevach, Birkot Ananin, other brachas. But go back to that. You can't do that. You have to follow what the sages said. So with regards to our pronunciation, at least of the Bible, we have a received tradition that has been written down. Yes, it postdates Chazal, but Chazal, we're already talking about, Kriyan Ktiv and, the different pronunciations of certain words and different Talmim on certain words, right? Things have already been determined. Yeah, there were later machlokatim, there were later disputes, arguments about these matters, but certain things have already been there. So when we're trying to pronounce the way things were, we basically try to mimic the Masoretic tradition because that's what's been recorded and that's what we received.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.